The early morning light poured through the tall glass windows of the music academy, landing softly on the polished marble floor. Students in neat uniforms walked through the halls carrying instruments and notebooks, chatting about lessons and recitals. Among them moved a man in worn-out clothes, pushing a squeaky mop bucket. He walked slowly, humming a tune as he cleaned the corridor floor that gleamed brighter after each stroke of his mop. His name was Tom. To most people there, he was just the janitor, someone they barely noticed or cared to speak to. He came early every morning before classes began and left long after everyone had gone home. No one really knew much about him, except that he was quiet and kind. He never complained about his job or the way students ignored him. He just hummed old songs while he worked, his voice carrying a strange calm that sometimes filled the empty halls. There was one person who noticed him, though, a girl who rarely spoke, and even when she tried, no one really listened. She was the daughter of the academy's owner, the powerful CEO who had built the place with his money and vision. Everyone respected him and feared him at the same time. His daughter, however, lived in silence. Her name was Lily. She was about 16, always sitting alone on the far bench of the music hall, sketching on her notepad while the others practiced. She never sang, never played, never spoke. Rumor had it that she was mute since childhood. Some said it was because of a medical condition. Others whispered it was due to a trauma she faced when she was little. Nobody knew for sure, and she never tried to explain. Despite being the daughter of the man who owned everything around them, Lily wasn't treated kindly. Some students made fun of her silence behind her back. A few pitied her, but no one truly tried to be her friend. They couldn't understand what it felt like to have a voice trapped inside, a voice that wanted to speak but couldn't find its way out. Every afternoon, when classes ended and the chatter of students faded, Lily would stay behind in the empty music hall. She liked the quiet when the echo of footsteps disappeared, and only the sound of the wind or a distant piano key could be heard. She would sit near the window, looking at the old piano in the corner, untouched and out of tune. That was when she first heard it, the soft humming of the janitor. It was a strange sound to hear in such a quiet, polished place. His voice wasn't perfect, but it was warm, deep and filled with emotion. It wasn't the kind of music the students practiced. It was something simpler, more human. The sound came from the hallway, and though she couldn't understand the words, she felt something shift inside her chest. Tom didn't know she was listening. He was mopping near the door, lost in his own world, humming the same song he sang every day. When he looked up, he saw her sitting there, eyes fixed on him like she was hearing music for the first time. He smiled, not wanting to scare her. "You like music?" he asked softly. She didn't answer, only looked at him. He noticed the small notebook in her hands, the pages filled with sketches of instruments and small words written neatly. He pointed to her book. "You draw music, huh? That's something special." Still no answer, but her gaze softened. She tilted her head a little, curious, almost shy. He went back to his cleaning, humming again, and when he did, she kept watching him, listening quietly as if the sound was soothing her heart. Over the next few days, this small, silent connection between them grew. Every time Tom cleaned near the music hall, he would find her there, sitting in the same spot. Sometimes she drew. Sometimes she simply listened. He began humming louder, sometimes softly tapping the broom handle on the floor like a drum. It made her smile once, just a small one, but he noticed. It was the first smile he had seen from her. One evening, when most of the academy lights had gone dim, Lily stayed behind again. Tom was cleaning near the stage. The piano sat there, covered with a white cloth. He stopped, looked at it for a moment, and said quietly, "Such a beautiful thing left to gather dust." She followed his gaze, her fingers tightening around her notebook. "Do you play?" he asked, even though he knew she wouldn't answer. She shook her head slowly. "Well," he said, pulling off the cloth, "you don't have to play perfect to make something beautiful. You just need to feel it." He sat on the old stool, pressing a few keys. The sound came out rough and uneven, but then he began to play a simple melody, soft, sweet, and a little sad. His hands moved slowly, unsure at first, then steady. The room filled with a tune that felt like it was telling a story. Lily's eyes widened. She had heard students play before, technically perfect, but this was different. This was real. It made her feel something she couldn't name. When he finished, he looked up at her. "You try," he said. Her eyes darted around, nervous. She shook her head again. "Don't be scared," he said kindly. "Music isn't about being right. It's about saying what you can't say with words." After a moment, she walked toward the piano. Her steps were small, hesitant. She sat on the stool beside him and looked at the keys. Her fingers hovered, trembling slightly. Tom leaned back, giving her space. "Just touch one key," he whispered. She pressed one. The sound echoed softly in the quiet room. Then another. Slowly, she began to press more, forming uneven notes. It wasn't a melody yet, but it was something. Her face showed concentration, then a faint joy. She closed her eyes for a second and let her fingers explore. Tom smiled. "There you go," he said softly. "That's music." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with something close to pride. For the first time, she didn't feel like the mute girl everyone ignored. For a brief moment, she felt seen. That night, after everyone left, the CEO walked past the hall and noticed the faint light coming from inside. He paused, frowning when he saw the janitor sitting beside his daughter at the piano. He was about to walk in, but then stopped when he heard the small sounds of music. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. Something inside him froze, but pride kept him from interrupting. He turned away quietly, not saying a word. The next morning, Tom came early again. He found a small piece of paper left near the piano. On it was a simple drawing, a broom and a piano side by side. Beneath it, written in neat handwriting, were two words, "Thank you." He smiled to himself. He knew it was from her. From that day on, they shared small moments, tiny exchanges that others never noticed. She would sometimes leave him a note or a drawing, and he would leave her a new song to listen to. It became their silent friendship, a bond formed not by words but by music and kindness. One afternoon, when rain poured outside and the halls were nearly empty, Tom found her sitting alone again, watching the rain through the window. He placed a small music box beside her, one that played an old tune when wound. "It's an old thing," he said softly, "but I thought you might like it." She turned the key gently and the music began. Her eyes softened as she listened, and after a moment she looked up at him and mouthed the word, "Beautiful." Tom's heart almost stopped. She hadn't spoken, but her lips had formed a word. He nodded quietly, pretending not to make a big deal of it, though inside he felt like he had just witnessed something miraculous. She was changing, slowly, but surely. The silence that had trapped her for years was beginning to crack. As Tom walked home that evening under the streetlights, he couldn't help but think of how strange life was. He had lost everything once, his home, his job, even the music he once loved. Yet here he was, helping someone find their voice. He didn't know where this quiet connection would lead, but he felt something deep inside him stirring again, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. And as for Lily, she spent that night sitting by her window, listening to the rain in the little music box. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, the academy was alive with noise again. Students hurried down the halls, the sound of laughter echoing off the polished walls. Teachers walked by carrying folders, giving instructions to those preparing for upcoming performances. But behind all that noise, in one quiet corner of the building, something gentle and silent was growing. Tom continued his work as usual, pushing his mop across the hallway floor. But something about him was lighter now, like a man carrying a small secret that made him smile to himself. Every time he passed by the music hall, he glanced at the piano, wondering if she'd be there, and she was. Lily sat at the piano bench again, waiting for him like she somehow knew he would come. The moment he appeared, her face lit up. She lifted her small notebook and pointed to a page where she had drawn a few music notes. Beneath them, she had written, "Teach me more." Tom laughed quietly. "You don't waste time, do you?" he said, putting the mop aside and sitting beside her. He began to show her simple things, how to press the keys with rhythm, how to feel the sound before thinking about it. She followed his hand movements carefully, repeating each one with patience. Sometimes she would look at him for approval, her eyes shining with hope. "You've got a good ear," he told her. "You feel the music before you play it." "That's rare," she smiled, her eyes full of quiet pride. It was the kind of smile that said everything words couldn't. Days passed, and their small lessons became routine. Whenever the halls emptied out, Tom would bring a small stool and they'd sit together in the corner by the old piano. Sometimes he sang softly while she tried to match the melody on the keys. Her voice never came out as words, just little hums, soft and uncertain. But they were there. Each sound she made was a small step toward something bigger. One afternoon, when the sun was sinking low and painting the room in a warm orange glow, Tom played a song he hadn't played in years. It was a tune full of sadness but also full of longing. His rough hands moved carefully over the keys, and his voice, though not perfect, carried the kind of emotion that reached straight into the heart. Lily listened, her hand frozen on her notebook. Her eyes filled with tears without her even realizing it. The melody wrapped around her, pulling at something deep inside her chest that she had locked away long ago. When he finished, there was a silence that hung in the air. Then she pointed to her notebook and began writing quickly. She turned it toward him. "What's that song?" she had written. Tom looked down at the words, his expression softening. "It's something I wrote a long time ago," he said. "Back when I still believed music could fix broken things." She frowned slightly, writing again. "It's beautiful," she wrote.
Why did you stop?
He stared at the page for a long moment. "Life happened," he said finally. "Sometimes when things hurt too much, you stop doing what you love. It's easier to stay quiet." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Maybe for the first time she understood that he carried his own silence too. A silence different from hers, but just as heavy. From that day forward, something changed between them. Their lessons were no longer just about music. They became moments of sharing pain without words. She played the piano and he sang softly. It was as if their hearts were speaking to each other in a language only they could understand. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled softly outside, Tom found Lily waiting again. She looked excited, her notebook already open on her lap. When he came closer, she pointed at the page. She had written, "I tried to hum today." His eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You did?" She nodded eagerly and touched her throat with her hand as if trying to show him. Then she closed her eyes and made a soft sound. It was barely a whisper, shaky, breathy, but it was there. A sound. Tom's eyes widened. He smiled so wide it nearly broke his tired face. "That's it," he whispered. "That's your voice, kid. Don't stop." She tried again, and this time the sound came a little stronger. It wasn't clear singing yet, but it was beautiful in its own way. The sound of someone finding their courage after years of silence. He clapped his hands softly. "You've got it. Keep doing that. Don't rush. Just feel it." Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they weren't from sadness. She was proud. She had made a sound, her own sound. For someone who hadn't spoken since she was a child, that one small sound meant the world. As the days went by, Tom taught her more, not just how to play notes, but how to let music flow from her heart. "Music," he told her one afternoon, "isn't about perfection. It's about truth. You tell the world who you are without saying a word." She wrote in her notebook, "That's why you sing like that? Because you have truth?" He smiled. "I sing because I have to," he said quietly. "If I don't, the silence wins." Sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, his face would change, a mix of sadness and memory. She noticed it often, but never asked. She knew everyone carried a past they didn't talk about. Then one day the school made an announcement. A talent show was coming up, one that would be broadcast online and attended by the CEO himself. All the top students were preparing, eager to impress the academy's strict judges. Posters went up everywhere. Teachers encouraged sign-ups. Lily read one of the posters quietly. Around her, the other students whispered and laughed. One of them smirked and said, "Maybe the mute princess should join too." A few others chuckled. She lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear. But later, when she met Tom in the empty hall, she handed him her notebook. She had written, "Could I ever sing one day? In front of people?" Tom looked at her a little surprised. "Why not?" he said. She shook her head quickly and wrote again, "People laugh. I can't speak right." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the piano. "You don't need to speak right," he said gently. "You just need to speak true." She thought about that for a long time. The next day she came earlier than usual. She didn't wait for him to start the lesson. She sat at the piano and began to play on her own. Her fingers were unsure, but her expression was full of feeling. When Tom arrived and saw her, he stopped by the door, quietly listening. The melody she played wasn't anything fancy, but it was full of her heart. It was the sound of someone who had been silent for too long and was finally learning how to speak again. Not with words, but with music. When she finished, he walked up slowly. "That's the song that touched your heart," he said softly. "Don't ever stop playing that way." She smiled shyly, writing, "Will you sing again?" "That song from before." He nodded, sat beside her, and began. His voice filled the room, low and soulful. She followed with the piano, her soft humming blending with his singing. The sound they made together was unlike anything the academy had ever heard. Outside the door, unnoticed by them, one of the teachers passed by and stopped. She stood there listening for a long time, unable to believe that the CEO's mute daughter was humming along with the janitor. Inside, Lily didn't care who was listening. For the first time in her life, she felt alive. She felt brave. When the song ended, Tom turned to her and said quietly, "You've got something the others don't. They can sing, but you can feel. That's what makes you special." She didn't write anything this time. She simply reached for her notebook and tore out one page. On it, she drew two figures, one old man with a broom and one girl at a piano, surrounded by small musical notes floating around them. She handed it to him with a small smile. Tom looked at it for a long moment. His rough hands trembled slightly as he folded the drawing and placed it carefully in his pocket. "I'll keep this," he said softly. "For luck." That night, as he walked home under the streetlights again, the city around him looked different, warmer somehow. For years he had lived quietly, carrying a past full of mistakes and sorrow, but now there was a spark of light in his life again. And somewhere in her room, Lily sat by her window, the music box turning slowly beside her. She closed her eyes and hummed softly, the same tune he had taught her. Her voice was still small, but it was growing. The world had laughed at her silence for years, but soon they would all hear the sound she had kept hidden inside her heart. Days turned into weeks, and a quiet rhythm formed between them. Every afternoon when the last bell rang and the students rushed home, Lily stayed behind. She always waited until the halls were silent before she went to the music room. Tom would arrive not long after, carrying his cleaning cart, humming softly like always. He never had to ask if she wanted to practice. She was already sitting at the piano, her fingers ready, eyes bright with anticipation. The lessons had stopped being lessons a long time ago. Now they were moments of peace, small pieces of time where they both forgot the world outside. Tom taught her simple songs first. Then he began to show her how to play by emotion, how to tell a story through the notes instead of just pressing them. "Don't think too much," he would say. "Let your heart lead your hands." And she listened. Each day her confidence grew. Her fingers moved faster, smoother. The girl who once couldn't make a sound was now filling the room with melodies that made even the janitor stop and listen in wonder. She had something rare, not perfection, but feeling. Sometimes she tried to hum along. At first it was barely a whisper. Then slowly a soft tune began to form. It wasn't clear or strong yet, but it was there, like a fragile flower trying to bloom after years of darkness. One evening, after a long practice, Tom sat beside her and said quietly, "You know, I used to teach music before this." She turned to him surprised. He nodded slowly. "A long time ago, before I came here, I had a small music school. It wasn't much, but it meant everything to me." He didn't say much more, and she didn't ask. She just looked at him with those understanding eyes, the kind that didn't need words. But that night she went home thinking about it. She wondered what could make a man with such a gift end up cleaning floors instead of teaching music. There was sadness behind his smile, a kind of story he wasn't ready to tell. The next afternoon, as they practiced again, Lily noticed that the piano's pedals were creaky. She pointed at them, frowning. Tom chuckled. "Old things seen better days," he said. "Like me." She shook her head quickly and wrote on her notepad, "You fix it. You fix everything." He smiled at that, eyes glistening slightly. "Not everything," he said softly. "But maybe some things." Their bond grew even stronger. It wasn't just about teacher and student anymore. It was like they had both found someone who truly saw them, the janitor who had been invisible for years, and the girl whose silence made people look away. Both had found comfort in each other's company. But their secret couldn't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, as they practiced, the door creaked open. Neither of them noticed at first. They were too caught up in the song. Tom was guiding her hands across the keys while humming softly beside her. She was following perfectly, eyes closed, feeling every note. Outside the door stood one of the teachers, Miss Ellen, the academy's senior instructor. Her eyes widened as she saw what was happening. The CEO's daughter sitting side by side with the janitor, laughing silently as she played. She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the floor. "What's going on here?" Lily froze instantly. Tom turned, startled, his face turning pale. "I was just—" he began, but she cut him off sharply. "This is completely inappropriate. You are not allowed to use the instruments, and you certainly have no permission to teach anyone, let alone the director's daughter." Tom stood up slowly. "I didn't mean any harm." She? Miss Ellen scoffed. "She is supposed to be under special care, not spending time with the janitor." She turned to Lily. "Your father will hear about this." Lily shook her head quickly, panic in her eyes. She grabbed her notepad and wrote, "Please don't tell him." But Miss Ellen only frowned deeper. Tom took a step forward. "Please," he said quietly. "If you must blame someone, blame me. She's just learning music. It's helping her." Miss Ellen's expression softened for a brief second, but her pride held firm. "Rules are rules. This can't continue." She walked out briskly, leaving silence behind her. Lily's hands trembled as she looked at Tom. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I'll handle it." But later that evening, he received a warning from the administration. He wasn't fired, but the message was clear. He was to stay away from the students, especially the CEO's daughter. For the next 2 days, he didn't go near the music hall. He still cleaned the floors quietly, but when he passed by, he avoided looking inside. He didn't want her to get into more trouble because of him. Lily noticed immediately. She waited after class, hoping he would show up, but he never came. She sat alone at the piano, staring at the empty stool beside her. The silence felt heavier than ever. On the 3rd day, she couldn't take it anymore. She found him sweeping near the back courtyard and walked up to him. He looked surprised, almost guilty. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. She quickly opened her notebook and wrote, "You said don't stop." He sighed, looking away. "Sometimes life makes us stop, kid." She wrote again, pressing the pencil hard. "Music makes me alive." Tom looked at the words and then at her face. Her eyes were filled with tears she refused to let fall. After a long silence, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said finally. "We'll keep going. But in secret, no one can know." Her lips curved into a small smile of relief. That night, they moved their practice to a different place, an old storage room near the back of the academy. The room smelled of dust and old wood, filled with unused instruments and broken stands. But to them, it was perfect. They cleaned it together, dusting off an old piano that was missing a few keys. Tom repaired what he could with spare parts, and soon enough, they had a place of their own, hidden from everyone else. From then on, their lessons became secret. They met after dark when most of the staff had gone home. The faint light from the single window was enough for them. She played softly while he hummed, and the two of them laughed quietly when a note came out wrong. It became their world, a world of broken instruments, dusty walls, and unspoken dreams. One night, as they finished a song, Tom looked at her and said, "You know, I used to dream of hearing my students play on a big stage. Maybe one day that'll be you." She smiled, writing quickly, "Maybe one day." He laughed. "Yeah, maybe." But behind that laugh there was something else, a thought he didn't say out loud. He knew the CEO would never allow it. The man was strict, proud, and distant. To him, Lily's silence was something to be hidden, not healed. Still, Tom couldn't give up. He had promised himself long ago that he would fix what life had broken in him, even if it was through someone else. Teaching her gave him that chance. As the weeks passed, Lily's progress amazed even him. Her playing was smoother, and her voice, though still fragile, had started to form real notes. She could hum entire melodies now. One evening, while she was practicing, Tom stopped her mid-song. "Listen," he said quietly. "Do you hear that?" She tilted her head, confused. He smiled. "That's your voice. You've got music in it now." For the first time, she laughed, a real sound, light and quick. It surprised them both. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. Tom grinned. "There it is," he said softly. "You just spoke through laughter." From that night on, something awakened in her. She began to believe in her own sound. She practiced longer, stayed later, and even started writing little melodies of her own in her notebook. And every time Tom heard her play, he felt something heal inside him too, something he thought was gone forever. He didn't know it yet, but their secret nights of music would soon lead to something much bigger. The world outside would eventually discover their quiet bond, but for now, in that little dusty room filled with broken instruments and echoes of their laughter, nothing else mattered. The janitor and the CEO's silent daughter were creating something powerful. Not just music, but a miracle. The new term began with more excitement than usual. Posters appeared on the walls of the Music Academy, shining under the hall lights. Grand Annual Talent Show, a night of music and dreams. The announcement spread quickly. Teachers spoke about it during classes, and students couldn't stop talking about what they would perform. Some planned to sing, others to play the violin or piano. It was more than just a school event. It was a competition where scouts from national music schools would be present. Even the CEO himself would attend. The air buzzed with energy, and for most students it was a chance to show off their talent. But for Lily it meant something entirely different. She stood by the wall one morning, reading the poster silently, her fingers brushing the edges. Her eyes lingered on one line: "All students are welcome to perform." She turned her head slightly and saw a group of girls nearby, laughing and chatting. One of them noticed her and whispered loudly, "Can you imagine if she tried to sing? The CEO's daughter who doesn't even talk?" The others giggled, walking away. Lily lowered her gaze. She didn't cry, but her hands tightened around her notebook. She had been through years of silence, but somehow those words still cut deep. Later that afternoon, she waited in the dusty old storage room, their secret space. She sat at the piano, running her fingers gently over the keys. When Tom walked in, she didn't greet him with her usual smile. He noticed immediately. "Hey," he said softly, placing his mop aside. "What's wrong?" She didn't write anything at first. She just pointed to the folded poster she had brought with her. He picked it up and read it. "Talent show, huh?" he said with a half smile. "Sounds like a big deal." She finally wrote a few words on her notepad. "I want to sing." He froze for a second. Of all the things she could have written, that was the last he expected. "You? Want to sing?" he repeated quietly. She nodded slowly, her eyes determined. He set the poster down gently and sat beside her. "That's a brave dream, kid," he said softly. "But it's not an easy one. You know how people can be," she wrote again quickly. "I don't care what they say." He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't scared this time. Her eyes held the kind of quiet courage that comes from surviving pain for too long. He sighed, a small smile forming on his face. "All right," he said. "Then let's make them listen." From that moment, their secret lessons changed. They weren't just playing for fun anymore. They were preparing. Each evening after classes ended, they met in the storage room and practiced. At first, she could only hum softly. Her voice was fragile, shaky. Sometimes it broke mid-note, and frustration filled her eyes. But Tom was patient. "Don't force it," he would tell her. "You don't have to be loud. You just have to be real." She nodded and tried again, each time a little stronger. Tom taught her breathing exercises, ways to relax her shoulders and control her voice. He told her to close her eyes and think of the song as a story, not a performance. "You're not singing to impress," he said. "You're singing to tell the truth." Little by little, she found her sound. Her voice wasn't like the polished ones of the academy students. It had a softness that carried emotion, the kind that made people feel something even if they didn't understand the words. Tom could see the change in her. Every time she sang, it was as if she was healing herself. Piece by piece, one night, as they finished a song, Tom leaned back and said, "You've got something special, Lily. The world just hasn't heard it yet." She smiled shyly and wrote, "Do you really think I can do it?" He nodded. "I don't think it, I know." But not everyone was happy about their secret. One evening, as they were practicing, the door suddenly opened. Miss Ellen stood there again, her expression tight and disapproving. "I knew it," she said coldly. "You're still meeting here." Tom stood up immediately. "Please, Miss Ellen." "No," she interrupted sharply. "This is unacceptable. You've been warned before." Lily stepped back, panic in her eyes. She quickly wrote in her notebook, "My choice. I asked him to teach me." Miss Ellen looked at the note, her expression softening just slightly, but her tone remained firm. You're putting yourself in trouble, dear. Your father wouldn't approve of this. Tom took a deep breath. She's learning to find her voice, he said quietly. Is that really wrong? Miss Ellen looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. You don't understand how things work here. This isn't a fairy tale. And with that, she walked away, leaving the door slightly open. Tom turned to Lily. It's all right, he said softly. We'll figure it out. But that night as he walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. The academy was strict, and the CEO was known for keeping his daughter away from anything that might embarrass the family. Still, he refused to stop. The next day, he showed up earlier than usual. He cleaned the classrooms quickly so that when Lily arrived after school, their time would be free. She came with her notebook and that same determined look in her eyes. She had written a few lines of a song she wanted to sing, her first original piece. The lyrics were simple about finding light in the dark and learning to speak after silence. When Tom read it, he felt a lump in his throat. That's beautiful, he said softly. You've written your heart right here. They began shaping the song together. Tom adjusted the piano chords, adding gentle transitions between verses. Every night they stayed a little longer, working until the music felt perfect. Sometimes she got tired, her voice breaking after hours of practice. But she never quit. Each mistake made her stronger. Finally, one evening, as they finished the last note, Tom looked at her with a smile that reached his eyes. You're ready, he said. She froze, staring at him in disbelief. Yes, he continued. You've got everything you need. The rest is just courage. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was excitement behind her fear. A few days later, the official list of participants was posted. Lily stood quietly near the board, scanning the names. When she saw hers, Lily, vocal performance, her heart skipped a beat. Whispers filled the hallway. Is that a joke? Someone said. The mute girl is going to sing? Another voice snorted. Maybe her dad forced them to add her name. Lily didn't respond. She just turned and walked away calmly, clutching her notebook close to her chest. Inside, though, her heart raced. That night she met Tom again. He saw the determination in her face and the fear behind it. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, he told her. You just sing for yourself, she wrote, for you too. He smiled faintly, his eyes moist. Then sing for both of us. As the day of the show grew closer, Tom fixed his old suit, the same one he had worn years ago when he was still a teacher. It was slightly faded, but he brushed it carefully, ready to support her from backstage. Lily practiced day and night. Sometimes she whispered the lyrics under her breath while walking down the hall. Other times she hummed softly during lunch, her classmates staring in confusion. The night before the show, she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, looking out at the city lights. On her desk sat the small music box Tom had given her months ago. She wound it slowly, listening to its delicate tune. For a moment, she remembered how scared she used to be of sound, how silence had been her prison for years. But now, sound was her freedom. She picked up her notebook and wrote one final line under her song. Tomorrow, I'll sing my truth, and she meant it. The next evening, the academy hall filled with people, students, parents, guests, and reporters. The lights sparkled above the polished stage. The CEO sat in the front row, his expression unreadable as he adjusted his tie. Behind the curtain, Tom stood with Lily, helping her steady her hands. Just breathe, he said softly. When the lights hit, think of it as our little room. Just you, me, and the piano. She nodded, trying to smile. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she felt ready. When her name was announced, the audience fell into an uneasy silence. A few whispers spread through the crowd. Is she really going to sing? Tom gave her one last encouraging nod. Go show them your heart, he said. And with that, she walked slowly onto the stage. The quiet girl, the CEO's daughter, the one everyone thought could never speak. The lights dimmed. The piano gleamed softly under the spotlight. And as she took her place in front of the microphone, the entire hall waited in silence, not knowing that what was about to happen would change everything. The hall went quiet as Lily stepped onto the stage. The bright light made her eyes blink for a second, and all she could hear was her own heartbeat. She felt her legs tremble, but she didn't move back. This was the moment she had dreamed about for months, the moment she had fought for with every breath and every note she had learned. She looked out into the crowd. The faces were blurry under the lights, but she could still see her father in the front row. He sat with his arms crossed, watching her with the same serious look he always wore at company meetings. She also noticed Miss Ellen beside him, biting her lip nervously, and somewhere behind the curtains, she knew Tom was there, watching, hoping, believing in her. The host's voice echoed softly. Next, we have Lily performing her original song. A few murmurs spread through the audience. Some students snickered quietly, thinking it was going to be awkward or silent. No one expected much. Some didn't expect anything at all. The piano started first, a soft melody that Tom had helped her create. It was gentle, almost like the sound of a heart opening after years of being shut. Lily closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then she began to sing. Her voice was low at first, a trembling whisper, but it was real. Every word came out fragile yet pure, like a butterfly taking its first flight. People leaned forward without even realizing it. The hall, once filled with murmurs, grew completely silent. Her song spoke about silence, how it can protect you but also trap you. It told the story of a child who had lost her voice because the world had been too loud, too cruel, too careless. But it also spoke about finding courage, about someone who helped her believe again, about how even broken voices can still create music. As she sang, her voice grew stronger. The fear began to fade from her face. The sound filled the hall, and even the ones who used to mock her sat frozen in their seats. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it carried something far more powerful: emotion. It carried truth. Tom, standing backstage, had tears in his eyes. He had heard her sing hundreds of times, but tonight it was different. She wasn't just singing, she was freeing herself. The CEO, sitting in the front row, shifted uncomfortably at first. He hadn't expected his daughter to do something like this, not in public, not in front of his peers. But as the song went on, his expression began to change. He saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in years, a spark, a strength that reminded him of her mother. When Lily reached the final verse, the lights dimmed slightly, and the piano slowed. She closed her eyes, holding the microphone close. Her voice cracked just a little, but she didn't stop. She finished the last line with tears on her cheeks. I found my sound in the quiet. The final note faded into silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. The whole hall stood still, as if they were afraid to break the magic that had filled the room. Then someone in the back began to clap. Slowly, the applause spread, soft at first, then louder until the entire hall stood up. People clapped, cheered, and some even wiped their eyes. The students who once whispered about her now stood with open mouths, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Lily stood there, frozen in the spotlight, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had sung. Behind the curtain, Tom felt a lump in his throat. He clapped too, his hand shaking slightly. He had promised her that people would listen one day, and they finally did. But as the applause grew louder, the CEO rose from his seat and walked toward the stage. The audience fell silent again, confused about what he was going to do. He walked slowly, his face unreadable. Lily's heart skipped a beat. Was he angry? Embarrassed? She didn't know what to expect. He stopped right in front of her, looking up at his daughter standing under the light. For a long moment, he said nothing. The audience watched, holding their breath. Then, to everyone's surprise, he reached out his hand and helped her step down from the stage. He didn't say a word, but the way he looked at her, his eyes moist, his lips trembling slightly, said everything. Lily blinked through her tears, unsure what to do. He finally spoke in a soft, broken voice that only she could hear. Your mother would have been proud. Her lips parted in shock. It was the first time he had ever mentioned her mother in public. The hall was silent again. But this time it wasn't out of doubt. It was out of respect. He placed a hand on her shoulder and looked toward the audience. Thank you, he said simply, for listening. Then he led her backstage where Tom stood waiting. When Lily saw him, she broke into a teary smile and ran toward him. Tom caught her gently, laughing through his own tears. You did it, he whispered. You really did it. She shook her head slightly and pointed at him, mouthing the words, we did it. He smiled, nodding. Yeah, we did. For the first time in years, her father looked at the janitor closely. He had seen him around the school but never paid attention. Now standing there, he noticed the tired eyes, the worn hands, and the quiet pride in his expression. You've been helping her, he said softly. Tom nodded. She helped herself. I just reminded her what she already had. The CEO looked at his daughter again, then back at Tom. Thank you, he said, 2 words he rarely used. Tom smiled humbly. She's special. She just needed to be heard. That night, after the event ended, the academy buzzed with talk about the performance. Students couldn't stop discussing it. Teachers replayed the song on their phones, and even the strict headmistress was seen wiping a tear when she thought no one was looking. For days after, the video of Lily's performance spread online. People who had never met her shared it, calling her the girl who sang after silence. But for Lily, fame didn't matter. What mattered was how she felt inside. For the first time in her life, she felt free. A week later, the CEO called Tom into his office. It was the first time the janitor had ever been invited there. The large room was filled with expensive furniture, but Tom stood humbly near the door, holding his cap in his hands. I've been thinking, the CEO began. I owe you more than a thank you. Tom smiled politely. You don't owe me anything, sir. I just did what was right. The CEO shook his head. No, you helped my daughter when no one else could. I didn't even know she could sing, let alone that she had been writing songs. Tom looked down. She's got more heart than most people I know. The CEO sighed deeply. You used to be a teacher, didn't you? Tom hesitated, surprised. How did you know? I asked around, the CEO said. You left a good life behind for reasons you didn't have to explain. But I think it's time you taught again, officially. Tom's eyes widened. Are you saying... The CEO smiled faintly. I'd like you to head a new music outreach program here. Something for the students who can't afford lessons or those who don't fit in. I want Lily to be part of it too. Tom didn't know what to say. For a moment he just stood there speechless. Then he nodded slowly. That would mean a lot. When he stepped out of the office, Lily was waiting in the hallway holding her notebook. She wrote something quickly and showed it to him. What did he say? Tom smiled, still a bit stunned. He wants us to start a new program together, he said. Looks like we've got more kids to teach. Her eyes lit up. She jumped forward and hugged him tightly. In the months that followed, the new music room was built. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, filled with old instruments that Tom fixed himself. Students who used to be ignored found a place there. Some came to sing, others to play, but everyone came to feel understood. Lily often sat by the piano, helping others the way Tom once helped her. She still carried her notebook, but now she wrote songs instead of fears. Her voice became stronger with each passing day, and every time she sang, the world seemed a little brighter. Tom watched her from across the room, smiling quietly. He had never needed recognition or money, only moments like this. Seeing her happy was more than enough. Sometimes, after everyone left, she would play that same song again, the one that changed everything. And Tom would hum along softly as he swept the floor, both of them knowing their journey had only just begun. One night, as they finished cleaning, Lily wrote on a small scrap of paper and handed it to him. It read, "You gave me my voice back." Tom looked at her with gentle eyes. "No," he said softly. "You always had it. You just needed someone to listen." And as they smiled at each other, the music room filled once again with quiet melody. Proof that kindness, patience, and belief can change more lives than anyone can imagine. Months passed since that unforgettable night at the academy. The once quiet halls now carried laughter, music, and the sound of new beginnings. The music program Tom and Lily started had grown into something bigger than anyone expected. Children who once hid their dreams came forward, holding guitars, flutes, or just their voices, and all ready to learn. Lily had become the heart of the room. Every afternoon she sat by the piano, helping younger kids find courage in their sound. Her smile was brighter now, her silence replaced by melody. The girl who once spoke only through a notebook now spoke through her songs. Tom, though, remained the same gentle soul. He still cleaned the classrooms early in the morning, swept the halls after everyone left, and smiled at every student who passed by. But behind his calm smile, something deeper lived, something no one had yet discovered. One afternoon, as the students were packing up, Lily noticed Tom sitting alone by the piano, staring at the keys with a strange stillness. His hands rested on them, but he wasn't playing. She walked up quietly and wrote a note. "Are you okay?" He looked at her and smiled faintly. Just thinking, he said. She tilted her head, waiting. He ran a finger over the keys slowly. You know, he said softly, music was once my whole world. I used to dream of big stages, grand performances, and thousands of people listening. But life had other plans. Lily listened closely, her expression gentle. He continued. When I lost everything, my job, my home, even the people I cared about, I thought music had abandoned me too. But then I met you. Her eyes softened and she placed her hand over his. You reminded me what music really is, he said. It's not about applause or money. It's about heart. It's about finding light even when you're standing in the dark. She smiled and wrote, Then we both found it. He nodded, his eyes glistening. But deep inside, Tom knew there was one last truth he hadn't told her, the real reason he had come to the academy. That evening, after everyone left, he took out an old, worn envelope from his coat pocket. It had been folded and unfolded so many times that the edges were beginning to tear. Inside was a letter, one he had written months ago but never had the courage to deliver. It was addressed to the CEO. Tom stared at it for a long while. His real scheme, as he called it in his thoughts, had never been about money or fame. It had been about something else entirely. Redemption. Years ago, when Tom was still a music teacher in another town, he had made a terrible mistake. He had trusted a business partner who used his name to sign false records and take funds meant for a children's music foundation. Though Tom was innocent, the blame fell on him. He lost everything, his reputation, his job, his faith in himself. Since then, he had lived quietly, working small jobs, staying away from music schools. When he heard the academy was hiring janitors, he took the job only because he wanted to be close to music again, even if it was just to sweep the floors of a place that still believed in it. He never planned to teach again. Never planned to get involved. Until he met Lily, she had reminded him what he'd lost, not just music, but hope. And helping her had healed something inside him that had been broken for years. The next morning, Tom finally decided to deliver the letter. He walked slowly through the academy hallways, passing the framed photographs on the wall, pictures of smiling students, awards, and concerts. His reflection in the glass looked tired but peaceful. He reached the CEO's office and knocked gently. "Come in," a voice said. The CEO looked up from his desk as Tom entered. "Ah, Tom," he said warmly. "What brings you here?" Tom hesitated before handing him the envelope. "I wanted you to have this," he said. The CEO opened it carefully. Inside was a confession of sorts, an explanation of Tom's past, his mistake, and his reason for coming to the academy. At the end, one line stood out. "I didn't come here to work. I came here to make peace with my own silence." When the CEO finished reading, he looked up, his eyes thoughtful. "You didn't need to tell me this," he said softly. "I already knew." Tom blinked in surprise. "You did?" He nodded. "I looked into your background before giving you the program. I found the reports and then the truth. You were innocent. You were trying to protect your students back then." Tom's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The CEO smiled faintly. "When I saw how you helped Lily, I realized you weren't here by chance. You were meant to be here. Maybe not as a janitor, but as a teacher and a guide." Tom swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he felt the weight on his chest lift. "I think your silence," the CEO continued, "was waiting for her voice to fill it." Tom nodded slowly, his voice quiet. Maybe that's true. Later that evening, the CEO called for a small gathering in the music room. The students gathered curiously, Lily among them. When Tom entered, everyone clapped, though he didn't yet know why. The CEO stood in front and said, "There's someone here who changed not just this school, but the way we think about music, kindness, and courage." Tom looked around confused, as everyone smiled at him. "He came here as a janitor," the CEO continued. "But he's leaving today as the Academy's new head of music and outreach." The room erupted in cheers. Tom froze, his mouth falling open slightly. Lily ran to him, eyes wide with excitement. She grabbed his hands, shaking them happily. Her notebook fell to the floor, but she didn't need to write anything. The joy on her face said it all. Tom's throat tightened. He looked at the CEO, who nodded in approval, then back at Lily. Looks like we've still got work to do, he whispered. That night, after everyone left, Tom sat alone in the empty music room. The piano gleamed softly in the moonlight. He played the tune Lily had sung at the show, her song about silence and sound. As the melody filled the room, he realized something. This was his redemption. Not through apology, not through fame, but through love, patience, and kindness. A few minutes later, Lily appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed one to him and sat beside him on the bench. She wrote on a small piece of paper, "You look peaceful." He smiled. "I think I am," he said quietly. She then wrote another line. "What was your real plan, Tom?" He looked at her and chuckled softly. "My real plan?" He paused, thinking carefully. "It was never about teaching or changing anyone. It was about keeping a promise I made to myself, to believe in people again." She tilted her head. He continued, "After everything I lost, I told myself I'd find one person worth believing in. Someone who reminded me why music mattered. And then I met you." Her eyes glistened. She reached out and hugged him tightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Tom froze for a second, realizing she had spoken. Not written, spoken. He pulled back slowly, staring at her in shock. You just..." She smiled, tears falling down her cheeks. "I found my sound," she whispered softly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle hum of the piano and their quiet laughter mixed with tears. Outside, the night sky glittered. The academy lights shone like stars, and somewhere in that gentle stillness, 2 hearts, once broken by silence, beat in harmony. From that day on, the story of the janitor and the CEO's mute daughter became a quiet legend at the academy. Not because it was dramatic or famous, but because it reminded everyone that kindness can awaken miracles, and that the simplest people often hold the deepest truths. Tom never sought credit for what he did. He continued teaching, smiling, living humbly. But every time Lily sang, every time her voice filled the halls, he felt the reward of his life's work. And in those moments, when the piano played softly in the background, and the echoes of her voice filled the air, he would close his eyes and whisper to himself, "This was the plan all along."